For reasons that escape me, and which almost everybody may regret, in just a few moments, I was invited to introduce both the president and the dean of the School of International Studies. So I'm going to do that. I loathe introductions, and I don't do the sort of long, here's the resume. If you want to know what they did before they got here, Google them, I mean, we taught you how to look stuff up. Go look it up. They're in Who's Who and all of that stuff. I think that's really boring stuff. So I'll tell you a little bit about President DeRosa, who will be here for just a few minutes. He's got a busy schedule today, so he's going to be here and he'll talk for a little bit and answer questions for a bit, and then he has to leave. And I understand some of you may be involved in another presentation as well. And after that, I'll introduce the Dean of the School of International Studies, for whom I have worked for the last 5 years. And there will be discussion of what's happened with international education on the campus. So that's what's happening this afternoon. I'm supposed to give sort of background information on Don. So I'll just tell you that we got him from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where he was provost, under strange circumstances. So I will tell you that. Strange and good circumstances. Things were a real mess. Things had been a real mess here for a very long time. I've been here since 1970. Right? Trust me. As a matter of fact, by the time they had climaxed, the accreditation agency said, we're not reaccrediting. We will come back and look again. They didn't put us on probation, but for a place of the stature of Pacific, to say you don't get reaccredited, we're coming back, was horrifying. And it's the only time I've actually seen what is generally a reasonably supine faculty get on their hind legs and say, something's got to be done here, because the administration and the regents are sending us down the tubes, and it's our institution. So they gave a golden handshake to the predecessor and set up a search committee that really did involve the whole community for, I think, the first time, really. And when we came down to the finalists, there were faculty members who actually went off to the institutions where these various candidates worked, dressed as gypsies and vagabonds, I think. So they could go around and say, what do you really think of this dude? And try to get honest answers. And everybody said wonderful things about Don. None of us entirely believed it because we'd been here a long time. But we were happy. And we brought him out. And I have to say, as I told the group this morning, I'm retired now. And it's all my own money. I don't get a pension from the university. I'm not shilling for the place. I don't have to. Right? I don't have to. I told Don and Phil, the new provost, the third meeting we had, that when they came into a public meeting, it was the first time in my experience at the university when I didn't feel embarrassed when the president and the second in charge of the university walked into the room. And that's true. Don has, as I say, this is a really so much better place than it was when you were here. It's true. Pacific has always had pockets of really interesting and good stuff. But the institution as a whole is so much better than when you were here. Partly it's because of what the faculty was able to do in bringing in new people, and partly, frankly, it was because we got a decent administration under President DeRosa finally. And he hired the right sort of people, and he made the right sort of decisions. And that's true. So that's my introduction. I am really delighted to have finished my career in an institution and under a president I could genuinely respect, Don DeRosa.
Court, thank you very much for those brief remarks. But I think that I'll just reflect on what Court was talking about. I won't go into any detail about any of the issues that he was raising, and not even talk about anybody that preceded me. But I know the provost feels this way, and I'd even imagine Margie would as well. One of the things that attracted me to Pacific was that, granted, there were fundamental difficulties here. There was no doubt about that. but the core of Pacific, its history, its culture, was so good, so strong. The thing that attracted me was, and I know the provost echoed this, in fact, we were talking about it this week. We have an annual meeting where we talk about all that happened the previous year and what we look forward to in the coming year. And what was stated was the fundamental reason we came to Pacific, because it was a good university. It was a good university. It was lacking some things. It wasn't a community that was working together. I think that's what we felt when we arrived. But it had this incredible pioneering history, a history that you're all a part of, that you are all a part of, this remarkable set of clusters. I think I told this story a few years ago. There was a reunion that was held, I believe it was Callison and Covell, but if I'm mistaken, I know I greeted a group from Covell a few years back, and I told the story that I was a newly appointed president. Even before I was brought on, I went to a seminar at Harvard, and at the Harvard seminar, seated at my table, the faculty member was Derek Bach. Derek Bach, the 20-year president of Harvard. He saw University of the Pacific and asked, what happened to the clusters? He wanted to know about that remarkable part of our history. And I was able to at least say some intelligent things because I had taken the time to learn about this great university and this great part of our history. And so I continue, obviously, to learn about it every day, and myself and the others in the administration continue to marvel at what a great institution this is, and we've just been honored to be able to help move the university forward a bit. But it really was that the fundamental strength of the university was in this faculty, so committed to students and the staff, I will say, even beyond the faculty, committed to the students' learning, but then also to their total development as individuals. And not paternalistic, but yet so caring about every individual student and their success. And so that is a core value of Pacific, and I'd like to say that we build upon that, we cherish that, and we will continue to sustain that into the future. But I'm here to offer you some thoughts about Pacific today and then answer some questions. And so in doing that, I'll just touch on a few things, and perhaps it'll be an inspiration for some questions for me. And as I looked out, I just want to say I see a number of former faculty here. And I thank you so much for coming back. The recent retirees, the most recent right here in court, but so many of you right here in front of me who gave so much to Pacific and made sure that Pacific stayed the right course. But today, Pacific is truly enjoying some remarkable accomplishments and some remarkable success. And I'll just highlight those for you, a few of those. You all know, of course, that we have a law school and a dental school. That dental school, which came into Pacific in 1962, is clearly perhaps the leading dental school in the United States. Gets 2,200 applications for 135 positions. Deans come from other institutions looking at our curriculum, looking at the way our students are prepared not only technically, but also as individuals. Though that School of Dentistry is by far one of the leaders in the United States and perhaps is the leader in the U.S. It has been and it continues today. Our goal was, let's get everything to that level. Let's get everything to that level and do the best we can. And in fact, the School of Pharmacy now receives the largest, 92 schools of pharmacy in the United States, receives the largest number of applications of any school of pharmacy in the U.S. It's a relatively recent phenomenon, wonderful leadership there, great faculty, just moving forward so well. Our law school in Sacramento, McGeorge School of Law, it doubled the number of applications just over the last 3 years. Have a wonderful dean, Elizabeth Rinskoff Parker, and a great faculty there. They received 3,500 applications now for a class of about 350. And just a few years ago, that was about 1,200, 1,300 applications. And here on the Stockton campus, the bellwether of how schools are assessed and looked at is always in terms of that freshman class. And I hope you're as proud of this as we are, but over the last 3 years, in looking at all the 4 years in California, Pacific has shown the largest percentage of increase in applications of any school in California. It's a great accomplishment, and we're so proud of it. And and so this year there'll be about 5,300 applications for 850 freshman spots, and our greatest concern is that we have too many. And I know it's a concern of the faculty as well. Why is that? Because we want to assure that we continue the highly personalized education, the kind of education that you all received and you experienced that changed lives, that made many of you individuals who learned for a lifetime. You're lifetime learners because of that kind of experience that you've had. So while we're always eager to see a few more students, we're very concerned that we don't grow too large so that we won't lose that highly personalized education that's been a hallmark of Pacific, and we won't. It's great. Just last weekend, greeting the parents of new students coming to Pacific, and it's wonderful. The thing that's happened at orientation, this is for orientation, the thing that's happened, there are parents who come to orientation, they're still shopping. They've got a student who's been accepted 10 places, and now it's down at Pacific and Stanford. I'm telling you, that's happening. A parent said to me, look, she's been accepted at Stanford, but she wants to come here. We want to make sure you're going to provide that kind of education that we want for her. So that's the kind of thing that's happening over time. And it's a great thing to see, but due to the core reason is because they know that the faculty are going to care about the students. They're going to be involved in those students, not just in the classroom, but beyond the classroom as well. And so that's where Pacific is today. We're very proud of the fact that we were recognized. We don't chase ratings. Some of you, if you look into the website, will find that we were rated by U.S. News and World Report 30th, I believe, 31st of the 250 national universities as a best value. Only California schools ahead of us, Caltech, Stanford, and USC. All the others, including the UCs, trail behind. So that's what's been happening, and we're so pleased by that. But the reasons for it, I'd say, is that we're also making investments. And the key investment that we've made, and I know that it's never enough, but the key investment we've made is in our people, our faculty and our staff, particularly the faculty to begin with, to raise and elevate those salaries of the faculty to a level comparable to other like universities as best we can. And so that has been a primary goal. It's been a primary matter in the budget of the university, a commitment to raise those salaries for faculty and staff to the level, not yet to the level we'd like it to be, but at least at a level to recognize all that these faculty and staff have done. So investments in people, investments in facilities. If you look, as you came in, right behind us here, behind this wall, is the expansion of Wendell Phillips Hall. That will bring together our faculty from the humanities and the faculty also from the social sciences, those in the College of the Pacific, so that there's a closer interaction among those faculty. And I know that while the faculty in philosophy regret having to leave the Philosophy Lodge, in time, I think they'll find this a very accommodating. I'm over here looking at the building the other day, checking it out, and I happened to run into the head of the philosophy department, Lou Matz. I said, Lou, how do you feel about this move? As the words were coming out of my mouth, I realized this is probably not the question to ask. But he said, I think there'll be some good that comes of it in time. And so that's the case. But you can imagine change is always something that one has to work on and help to inspire. But having said that, investments in facilities, continued investments in financial aid, continued investments, part of that equation of best value, it's based on the quality of the educational experience and also the accessibility of the institution, the accessibility. The programs for financial aid, and Pacific has among the most robust programs for financial aid you can imagine. Those of you who are from California, and I realize there's more in this room that are not than I normally address, but those of you who are from California, in fact, I met someone last evening who said, I came on some kind of grant to Pacific. It came from the state, and it was to help us so that we didn't have to build more UCs and the like. That was the Cal Grant program. Pacific, for every student who comes with a Cal Grant, which was until this year $9,700 a year, we guarantee a match of that for that student who brings that Cal Grant, a $10,000 award, and that allows us to bring first-generation students to Pacific, students who would have never had the opportunity for an independent higher education experience, and so we will continue to do that in the future. So the important matter I'm speaking about right now is the fact that the key to our success is that continuing that accessibility to first-generation students and to students who may have legacies in terms of families who've come to Pacific over the years. And of course, financial aid programs, robust financial aid programs are required to do that. And so I'd say that that's also one of the reasons for the success we're enjoying today. I would also say that the campaign that we're in right now is gaining momentum. We're off to I call it a start. I'll call it a start until we finish it. But a campaign for $200 million. I said to the board when they launched the campaign, I said, this campaign, I congratulated them for voting for it because they were the ones that are going to have to step up, many of them, and be leaders in the campaign in terms of their own personal commitments to Pacific, at least to the capacity to give. And I said, you have just set in motion the $500 million campaign that will follow on the heels of this campaign. And the reason for saying that was because I think one of the things that was neglected and we still have to work on was our whole program of advancement and development, that continuing work that we do with alumni to continue to ensure that they're connected and feel so good about their Pacific education and what's going on today that they themselves will continue to give back to the best of their ability to do so. And so that is gaining momentum. I think it sits at about $135 million of a $200 million campaign, but there are two elements in it that are going to be a challenge for us, but we're going to accomplish it. Most of you recall those wonderful Quonsets. Some of you were out there looking for them, I know, when you arrived, and thought you might be on the wrong end of campus, but there were the Quonsets, or the metal buildings that many of you will remember, that were temporary buildings built in the 1940s to house largely the V-12 program. But the V-12 is a program for the Second World War, and they served the geosciences and art department exceedingly well, and probably other departments through the years. But they were clearly an eyesore and not the kind of facilities that you could attract the best students to. I kind of made a pledge, you know, being in psychology, I knew over time I would adapt and I would not see those any longer. So I made this pledge, remember what that looks like as when you first saw it. And in fact, our commitment was to find a way to find wonderful facilities for art and geosciences. And in fact, they're now on South Campus. I hope you can see it. Jeanette Powell and Bob Powell, Bob, former Regent of Pacific, Jeanette, a Regent currently, stepped forward to help us with the Art Center. The Jeanette Powell Art Center, Geosciences, has wonderful educational facilities right now. And the Quonsets are gone, but if you look at that, it's a wonderful, wonderful piece of property right in the core of the campus, right in the heart of the campus. And it just beckons for a facility. And if you think about it, what do we need? Apart from and we need continued improvement in educational facilities, and I'll talk about one in particular. But we truly, if you look at this, what's so fundamental about Pacific? It's a community. The sense of community and the relationships that are formed here, the faculty, the students, the staff, all being together. What we need is a university center. I won't say anything about the McCaffrey Center, but if you really think about it, the McCaffrey Center is kind of a maze of things, and it doesn't really fill any bill. And so the board, through the National Commission on the Future of the University of Pacific, were any of you involved in the work of the National Commission? If you were, would you just raise your hand? Because there's a handful of folks that were, but that was work where we engaged alumni, friends, faculty, and others to give us ideas about what we needed at Pacific, and a university center was among them. So our goal is to build a $30 million university center right up against the levee. In fact, we're ready to reinforce the levee if the Corps of Engineers will give us some money for it. And we'll build a beautiful university center overlooking the Calaveras, looking out to those beautiful residence halls that now are on the north side of the Calaveras as well, but beckoning out to the south campus as well. So that's a key. And another key is a science building. The faculty have done so well in the sciences. The surge of interest in the sciences, the pre-health professions and the like, is just remarkable at Pacific, but we need better facilities. And so a science facility, probably a complex over time. That's the $50 million campaign. But the first leg in it is a biology building for about $20 million. And so we're working on that. We have to raise the funds for that. But we also have to raise funds for program support, endowing programs to ensure their long-term success. And so that's what we'll be doing. Our academic programs, one of the things that's a key to the success as well is the way we have integrated liberal and professional education at Pacific, and in particular, the opportunity to accelerate work from undergraduate to professional programs. If you look at it, the students that are coming that want that School of Pharmacy are a remarkable group, so talented. They want to get into that School of Pharmacy, and that Special Advantage program is a key. The dental school, obviously. The law school now, finding ways to accelerate the work to law. And Margie herself is working on a program with another institution of higher education to accelerate work from Pacific on to graduate work. That's the key, I think, that will ensure the long-term success of Pacific, utilizing the power that we have, utilizing collaborative efforts to make sure that it's an education second to none. And so that's what I would say adds to the great success. I will also say a strong general education program is the core of a Pacific education for every undergraduate. We have that core and fundamental mentor series that every student who enters as a freshman is required to take, those 3 courses that really help them develop that compass that helps them through their life, that moral compass that guides them through their life. But we can do more with that. We just reviewed that program. We made a fundamental decision to move general education to the College of the Pacific from the provost's office. Not that the provost wasn't doing a good job with it, but it's important that where the faculty who have major responsibility for delivery of that program, that it's housed with them. And so they're looking at that program right now to enrich and reinforce it. And so those are the things I would point to as reasons for the success we enjoy today. But I'll also say it's built upon the shoulders of so many people, so many that preceded us. And you are all included among those. So thank you very much for the opportunity to visit with you today.
It's a really terrific segue, and we didn't even plan it, because Dean Ensign is going to talk about some of the developments in international education and what we're doing in SIS. I'm given the job to introduce her, and I'm not going to go through the CV stuff. She wanted to make sure that I told you that she does work in the real world, too. She's been very active in East and West Africa in various AIDS projects. A quick introduction to Dean Ensign. We started the School of International Studies 16, 17 years ago. It was a few years after the demise of Raymond Callison. And a number of the people from the cluster colleges were involved, including myself, and I was the first dean. So I've always found the notion that there isn't continuity bizarre, as if all of us had somehow died. It's not true. And as a matter of fact, SIS is in lots of ways a reflection both of the Callison and the Raymond experience. It's ironic, Margie is your age. I'm not, but she is. She went to New College in Florida, which was a very Raymond-esque program. 3 years, sort of do your own thing, but she was also sort of Callison type in that she studied abroad at a time when not an awful lot of people did. So when we were looking, the SIS was going through some bad times too, you know. And we had been in some decline, and we'd brought candidates out, and we brought Margie, and she was not my first choice. I distrust anybody who does PowerPoint. I'm old, and I don't like it. And that's that. But oddly enough, she'd been the student of the dean of COP at the time, was a friend of mine, Bob Benedetti. So every 2 weeks in a fluster, I would go to his office and say, remind me again that it's going to be all right. And he'd, yes, you'll love her. So, and within 2 months, I'd have laid down in front of a tank for her. People say, what was it like to get Margie? And I said, describe before and after the Big Bang. There is simply no way of talking about it. She brought enormous energy and drive and innovation. She's the best administrator I've ever worked for. She is as much the spirit of Raymond and Callison as anyone I have ever met in my life. And the heritage of international and innovative education at Pacific couldn't be in better hands. Margie Ensign.
Very tall people have preceded me. Thank you, Court. I have looked forward to this moment for 5 years, since I became dean. I think we share some passions and some dreams in common. We certainly have shared some of the people, and if that's a big part of what a university is about, and that's what I heard this morning at the Callison meeting, is that those people changed your lives forever. And I know what you experienced because I've had the great joy of being with Court and Jerry and Bruce, the people that put together your program. So I know how important they were. I know they changed your lives forever, and they continue to change our students' lives forever. You did participate in one of the greatest experiments in education, in higher education. There's no question about it. In getting ready for this reunion, I find a letter from President Kennedy to the president of the University of the Pacific, saying, I send my warmest congratulations to the president, the regents, the faculty, and the students on the occasion of the establishment of the Elbert Covell College. This new college, which I understand will offer 4 years of academic courses, all taught entirely in the Spanish language, opens up new vistas of enlightened international relationships between the people of the United States and the people of Spanish-speaking nations. The Congressional Record recorded the first day of Covell College. Raymond College was in the Wall Street Journal, December 26, 1972. Raymond College is the oldest of the 3 clusters established in 1962. The accreditation report, a Carnegie report, singled it out as one of the most distinguished liberal arts colleges in the nation, Wall Street Journal. Newsweek, September 30th, 1963, on Callison College. Callison College emphasizes the social sciences and the humanities with a particular focus on non-Western civilizations. You were pioneers, there's no question, and the faculty that put this together were pioneers, and it's wonderful to see that 30 years later, Harvard University is doing what happened here 30 years ago, the New York Times in April. Harvard says that students need broader education, the New York Times, April 27th, 2004. For the first time in 30 years, Harvard University has reviewed its undergraduate curriculum, concluding that students need a greater familiarity with the world that can only be gained from studying abroad. The dean says, at this time of American influence and growing responsibilities in the world, Institutions such as Harvard bear a responsibility to educate its students to be knowledgeable and responsible as they go out in the world. 30 years later. I've heard all weekend that these grand experiments died. The demise of Callison, the demise of Covell, the demise of Raymond. They didn't die. And that's what I hope to tell you today. If a university is more than a building, and I agree with you, William, it's not the buildings. If it's its people, you've got Court and Bruce and Jerry and the deans and John Williams and Larry Pippen. If it's those people, and if it's about ideas, isn't that what universities are about? The roots of the School of International Studies are in Callison and Covell and Raymond. Well, how is that the case? This little School of International Studies. Let's talk about where we are in the US right now in terms of the education you had here. We haven't come very far. The School of International Studies is one of only 6 undergraduate programs in the United States, one of 6. In the 21st century, the United States, arguably the only superpower, has 6 full undergraduate schools of international studies. The rest are all out east. Our competitors are Georgetown, American, George Washington, University of Miami, and Seton Hall. So you have those in the east and the south, and in the west, you have the School of International Studies at the University of the Pacific. There are only 6. The rest say, wouldn't it be nice if you studied abroad? It might increase your understanding of the world if you left, so we encourage you. The faculty in the School of International Studies says every one of you must leave the country if you're going to become an international professional. So in the 21st century in the United States, we're the only school that says you have to leave. Unlike what you experienced, we say you have to have at least a second language. So we don't do our courses in Spanish, but we insist that they at least have a second language. I graduated a young man 2 years ago who spoke 7 languages, a Vietnamese boat refugee child. So languages are very important to us. Well, what about Raymond, those folks who are so interesting, who are interdisciplinary? It didn't die either. The first course that our students take, Contemporary Issues of the 21st Century, is taught by 5 faculty members. An economist, a political scientist, a historian, an anthropologist, and an environmental scientist. And those students experience the same thing you did, walking in saying, how is it possible that we could understand the world from all of these disciplines? And they end by saying, what would have happened if we hadn't had that education? So interdisciplinary is deeply woven in our school. And I still hear, I don't know if there are other senior administrators here, I still hear, you're very expensive, you little School of International Studies. Maybe 1 or 2 faculty members could do it rather than 5. And this faculty says no. We have to continue to do it that way because otherwise we'll be producing very narrow people who see the world like this. Imagine if Donald Rumsfeld or Paul Wolfowitz had had this education. You can imagine why I'm always in trouble here. But it's the only fully interdisciplinary program I have found in the United States. And I came back from a week, last week, touring the best schools in the East with my daughter, who's a sophomore in high school. And we went to Columbia, where I began my career. And we went to Brown, and we went to Vassar, and I was only allowed 1 question. And my question always was, how do you put together the different disciplines? And this was the answer everywhere. Well, if you're interested in international affairs, you take Econ 101, and you take Political Science 202, and you take this history course, and maybe you take a language course and you put it together. And I was appalled that what we think are the best universities in the country are still doing interdisciplinary that way. That's what that means. We don't believe that. The faculty doesn't believe that. And so our students are overwhelmed for a few years. It's very hard when you're 17 to say, you need to understand economics, politics, history, anthropology, you need another language, and you got to figure out how to put it together. We'll assist you, but we continue to do that. So the education that our students get in the School of International Studies is so much like what you got. And they look a lot like you. I heard your stories this morning, and I wish you could hear my students, because their stories are so much like yours. Their lives were transformed being abroad. They continue to be transformed. They're flexible people like you. They've learned to study and live, and now I really encourage them to do internships while they're abroad. So they're learning how to work in another culture. I heard Manuel this morning from Covell College talk about his experiences growing up in the bar. Callison, what did I say? Oh, sorry. Whoa. Sensitive folks we have here. But talking about growing up in the barrio and what it meant to come to Callison. And it reminds me of Feli, who we graduated this year. And I didn't even know her story until I asked her to speak to a bunch of high school kids. One of the things that's different about SIS is I used to love this word, but we're deeply embedded in our high school and middle school community here. So half my time is spent talking to at-risk students. That means students whose parents never went to college. And I brought Feli with me, and which was wonderful, because who wants to hear a dean when you're in high school or when you're alum? And I said, Feli, how are you doing? How are you financing this university? And she said, well, my parents came here from Mexico when I was 6, so I'd have a better education, and they have no money. And so when I was in high school, I started looking around for scholarships, and I got one, and she looked these kids in the eyes and said, guess who's paying for my education? And they couldn't imagine. And she said, Bill Gates. I'm a Millennium Scholar. And I thought, that's the kind of young person we're attracting. I hear it from the recruiters who come. Did any of you know the Maersk Corporation? A few of our students are interested in corporations, particularly those who are socially responsible. Maersk is now the largest shipping company in the world. And they've hired 2 or 3 of our students every year. And 2 years ago, the chief recruiter flew in from Europe, which kind of blew me away. And I went out and introduced myself, and I said, welcome, I'm so glad you're here, but why are you here? We're the smallest of the 6 schools. And he said, I've been recruiting over 10 or 15 years, your students. I have never met 21-year-olds that I can put in any country in the world. And he said, they don't survive, they thrive. What in the world is going on here? So it's a pretty unusual education that we see. So there are incredible linkages with your past and what continues. If it means something to you that we don't call it Callison, and we don't call it Covell, and we don't call it Raymond, then maybe what we're doing isn't important. But that's not what's important to me. It's the education that they're getting. And let me tell you, if you want to recreate those names, my job as dean is to find a name for my school. And I said to Baxter Urist, who's on my advisory board, and Martine Burt from Covell, that's great. If they want to recreate it, most of it exists. Let's find a way to rename it based on the wonderful schools that you attended. I think we have a bigger challenge. I don't think it's just about the education our students get. I don't think we've ever faced a time in our country and the world when the need for the education that you had and that my students had, people who benefit from an international education, who know what interdisciplinary means, who understand other cultures and other languages, I don't think it's ever been greater. We haven't come very far as a nation since you were here, and that's what scares me. Less than 1% of American students study abroad. It hasn't budged a lot since you were here. 1/3 of our congressional representatives do not hold passports. What does that mean? It means they don't expect to be leaving the country. So we have a lot of work to do together. I don't agree with Frank, who I met from Covell, who believes we're on the Titanic. I believe we still have time to turn that ship, but people like you need to work together. I think one of the greatest threats we face as a nation comes not from the bombs and the terrorists, but comes from our ignorance of other countries and other cultures. So how do we begin to solve this problem that we all care about? Teaching is a big part of it. That's probably why we did and are doing what we're doing. It's very slow. We know that. But I was so thrilled this morning to hear so many of you say you are teachers. You're middle school and you're high school. And I said SIS is doing something that didn't happen, and it's maybe one of the things I'm proudest of. 4 years ago, was it, Court? 3 or 4? We really felt we needed to reach out to this community more. We're still in this a community under enormous pressures and transforming itself, but we didn't have good connections with the schools. So we applied for a little grant from the California International Studies Project, and we got it. And we began with 2 high schools and their 2 middle schools, the high school around the corner, Stagg, and another high school, and 2 middle schools, and we began to work with their teachers just to begin teaching them about international studies and world history. Well, 9/11 hit, and a lot of people very quickly became interested in these issues. In fact, that morning we opened our doors and half the university walked in and said, please explain this to us. So our job as teachers and educators has changed a lot here in the university. But that little program grew from 2 high schools and 2 middle schools to the point where last year we taught 600 high school teachers alone. We have Davis, Sacramento, Lodi, Stockton, and Manteca and Tracy school districts that we're reaching out to. I'm really proud of that, and I'm really proud that last week the entire state apparatus, seeing what was happening here, moved from Stanford. So we will have the headquarters of the whole project here at Pacific, covering the whole state. No. I don't want you to clap. I want you to think about what that means. It means that if we don't reach those young people early, if we don't reach the teachers who've never had training in international studies, that's why we're training the teachers. They said to Jerry Hewitt for a whole year, explain the Middle East to us. Tell us what we can tell our students about this area and China, and Bruce has done work on cultures. So the little school that I run that has 5 full-time faculty equivalents, 5, has done an enormous job of not only teaching the students here at Pacific, but teaching our community. And I thank those of you who are doing that as teachers in your community, because I think that's essential work. So how can we help each other? What are some of the things I would like to see you doing in terms of linking? And maybe you've got many more ideas. And we can talk at length later, if you'd like, about what we do nationally and internationally. But the first thing I would ask your help with is something called e-mentoring. 3 years ago, Howard Mosley, Howard, if you could just stand up so people see who you are. Howard is an alum from the first graduating class of the School of International Studies. And we talked about the need to link current students with past students, to learn from them, to learn from you about careers, about work, about big life questions. And we set up a one-on-one e-mentoring student where each senior could have one alum that they could work with. It worked pretty well, but then Howard realized we could be doing it a lot more efficiently, and we've set up a kind of a virtual e-mentoring program on Blackboard where any alum can come in and mentor any student. And we'd love to put you on that if you would be willing and interested. And Howard has computers set up over in George Wilson Hall, which is Callison Lodge. And one of the wonderful things that's happening is the alums are mentoring each other. And maybe more of that than mentoring students and connecting with each other. So that's one of the ways that we can link, I think, and I ask you for your help in that, because my students really do need to learn from your experience and all the wonderful things that you've done. Do 1, if not 2 or 3 of those events every week, and that's a huge part of what we see as our mission, and I'd love to have you back in any way that you'd be willing to talk about important international issues. Maybe you can't travel back. So what I'm trying to set up, and I'd love help with that too, is turning our building into one where we can do live internet feeds so that you could all be hearing the wonderful speakers that we have. I'd love to have some help setting up internships, because I truly believe that one of the ways you begin to find your passion in life is not just sitting in a classroom. It's out there doing something. So I thank Martine Burt, who's also on my advisory board, a Covell alum. Martin was the mayor of Asuncion. When he stepped down, he took over a school for the 100 poorest boys in Paraguay, and they get a free education, and my students have been down there interning. And I thank Martin for that, although you may or may not know he's in the middle of a political trial. He's been put on trial by the Paraguayan government, and we've all been trying to find ways to support him. He's been in this trial for 4 weeks. So I'll be happy to talk to any of the Covelianos who are interested in what's happening to Martin. But those internships are absolutely critical. And we'd like to know what you've done with your education, because that's really important to me. When questions are raised, what impact does an interdisciplinary international education that requires everyone to leave the country and does superb cross-cultural training, what does it do to people? I need those stories. I want those stories. So over in our building again, we've got 2 filmmakers who would love to hear what you're doing with your education. I think it's important not only for the university and not only for SIS, but we begin to catalog for the country why this education is not important. It's essential. Every young person in America should leave America, should learn another language, should learn to learn in an interdisciplinary way. So I think they're unbelievable linkages. Your schools didn't die. They're renamed. They've evolved in good ways. They had to change because the world's changed. But I think we are doing our best to continue on the passion and the ideals and the dreams that you had. And I'd love to have your help in continuing those. The bigger question I think we have is how can we work together to harness the passion and those dreams that are still very much in this room to solve these huge global problems that we are all facing. And I'd love to work with you not only on reconnecting Callison, Covell, and Raymond to the university, but how we move forward in solving some of those problems. So I thank you for coming back, and I welcome your questions. Thank you.